let's dive in.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so this is so lovely. Thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes to this exploration.
Of course.
I I love how we're living what you're talking about in the book in terms of there's a connection that happens and we dive into the experience without necessarily all the backup stuff that's required.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is an adventure, right? Like this is an adventure in all things to explore inside ourselves, about our world, about each other. And so I'm really grateful that you're here. And I have a few different things that I would love to explore with you as we navigate
Mm,
this conversation. And then who knows where else. So
sure.
let me start, if that's okay with you, by introducing myself and by
Mm,
introducing the intentionality behind these conversations because it is new for me. So, my name's
mm,
Stella Moresi, and I am the creative director of the Well Systems Institute, where we help women transform their relationship with themselves so that they can shape and shift their internal context and then create intentional, meaningful lives.
mm.
So that's quite a, it's quite a job. So it's really, really
Yeah.
fun for me. And these conversations, the intention behind the Boundless Leader Self live conversations are to just invite fun, incredible women with a critical voice in making a difference. So for me, that's you. And so I'm really grateful that you're here. And I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what's meaningful for you in this moment as you're navigating your reality moving forward. Let's start
Mm.
there.
Okay. I mean, first of all, because this will link to my answer to that, I love, and I think it was one of the things that connected us, your focus on relationship with self as like a starting point for how you show up in the world. I think I've been working on social change, organizational change, individual change my entire career. And I think my focus has gotten ever more sort of granular and internal into that the ways in which we negotiate the script that we were handed when we were born, whether or not we ever knew we had it. It was there and it shaped our understanding of who we were allowed to be and what we thought we could imagine we could become. So I think part of my sense of purpose is to kind of lift that negotiation with self, if you will, up to a more explicit and intentional space. And I feel like I'm literally doing that as we speak with myself.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think on two levels. One is, I'm a 54-year-old woman, and the script for 50 something year old women, people, is changing rapidly. What do I think I can do now? How visible am I allowed to be? How much do I own my own authority? At a time when my mother was sort of disappearing, I'm allowing myself to step out. And that requires literally almost a daily negotiation. Sometimes it can just be a minute. Sometimes it's, lying in bed a little bit longer. But uh, it's, yeah, there's that script that hangs over me that, maybe I should stay small. Maybe I should stay quieter. And so this journey for me of publishing a book and now putting myself into spaces where I'm sharing my experience, sharing my thoughts, it means that I've got to continually practice permitting myself to undo a lot of what I'm carrying with me. And that's that's my daily work as I move into new territory in my life. As I try to break sort of whatever spoken or unspoken limits exist in me of maybe I'm aiming too big, maybe I'm trying, too much. It's kind of yeah. So I'm giving myself permission routinely. And we can keep unpacking that as we speak, but I am definitely in a process of writing a script that I've never inhabited and one that I don't have a lot of role models for. So it's an interesting time.
That's really powerful. That's
Yeah.
really powerful, and from what I've gathered, and I've read most of your book, but not all of it, what I've gathered and what impressed me, what left an impression on me was the presuppositions of power and daring in your message.
Mm.
So, the scripts that you're talking about, the ones that all of us have been, programmed with from moment 1, basically, they're disempowering scripts. Right? There's scripts that tell you you should stay small. There's scripts that tell you that, if you dare to reclaim your power, you're going to be punished. And we have countless examples of how that's the case.
Yep.
And yet we don't ever explore the examples, like you said, without role models. I'm fortunate because I have role models and I
Mhm.
can also see what it takes even with role models, right? Because you actually have to awaken to that reality for yourself. You have to begin to test that reality for yourself and embody that reality for yourself. So I was very, I'm very mindful of the process of, for example, writing a book, which I'm in the midst of. So I'm really like
Mm.
all the questions for you around how navigating that changed you.
Mm.
But that's a good one. Let's talk about that for a moment, because that's a script that's a script that doesn't exist for women as a generalization, right? Especially when we're talking about reclamation of personal power, not through the lens of "You go, girl," you know?
Right. Right. A voice of believing in your own voice and trusting your own voice as having authority in the world. Um, I started during COVID. I kind of went into our back room.
Mm,
Writing has always been a retreat for me. Like that's something that I have muscle memory of. And for the most part, it was a way to just make sense of a world. This started off different. I was like, okay, I need to get some thoughts down about a business that was growing, gaining clarity in my own mind. That was again about navigating change and uncertainty and breaking through some of the self-limiting ways of operating. And it kind of just started to come. And I was like, oh, this is this is not what I had in mind when I sat down, but let me get out of my own way. And in the first instance, just let it come and not try too hard to figure out what it's meant to be in the first round. But to get it from that, sitting in my spare room, sort of just letting ideas flow to a book that was published last October, whew, involved me believing that I had something valuable to say, not just to a room of participants in a workshop, but the world. And what was I going to do if somebody read it and said, I think this is absolute crap? Um, who are you? What are you talking about? Like, where's your authority? How do you know this? Like, all those things kind of rear their heads in ways over the course of time. This, who do you think you are? What if people don't like it? Um, am I willing to back myself? And am I willing to really stand in the authority of what 30 years of career and a whole lifetime of being has taught me? And, before I pressed go, I had to be like, oh, okay, no, people are gonna dislike it, people are gonna question it, people are this, people are that, but, um, I think, for me, I've always been very comfortable in rooms. I've very been very comfortable even on stages, but this is the biggest stage, and accepting the fact that you're opening yourself up on that stage is, whew, daunting, and especially for women, and especially, again, for, 50-something-year-old women who historically have been treated as past it. So, it took a lot of sort of routine, um, curious questioning of myself, looking at where did these beliefs come from? Why are these fears hanging around? What's the worst case scenario? What's at stake for you in this? And it took 4 years.
mm,
It was not A plus B equals C for me. It was a real winding path. So I had a lot of stories in the first few drafts, And I realized I had a one editor sort of say to me, "Oh, this feels like memoir." And I was like, I don't wanna write a memoir, like, I've done that. I did, I wrote a memoir. I was like, "No, that's not." And when she sent me something back that was like, "Oh, we don't do memoir people," I was like, "Have I actually written, like, a memoir?" Because that's what I'm comfortable doing is storytelling and coming from that place of self and story. Whereas writing a book with an authoritative voice that says, "Hey, here's some ideas I have to share with you," felt much more uncomfortable for me. So when I stripped all of that away and had to sit in the kind of um, clarity of a voice that was much more, "Hey, you, here's my thoughts about how you might be feeling right now." There was this brief moment of sort of like, "Oh, am I really going to do this?" And then in the next moment, I was like, "Yes," because if I'm going to put this book into the world, it's going to be my sharpest voice, my clearest voice. And this is what I have to do. So it's like a shedding, we all have experienced that where you're just pulling stuff away and you're like, "Oh, no, I don't want that anymore. No, so yeah, yeah, it was, interesting, interesting.
Mhm. I love that, and the part that sticks out for me is the part about I have a message, and I want that message to be clear, and you start your book with something that for me was deeply moving because you're talking about this is your message to your children. This
Mm,
is the voice and it's like I have chills as I say that because it really that is what matters. It's like, what is the message that we want to leave behind as the legacy? And in a culture that teaches us to be story driven,
mm,
think you end up in that space that you just described of, am I just telling my story? And there's a difference between, and I mean, stories are useful to contextualize. I understand that. And I also know that there's a difference between telling the story and sharing the message, right? That the
right,
message is about the process with which to live within a particular context.
yeah.
So I would love to hear a little bit from you about this notion of permission and how that came about for you. What was the moment of realization for you that this is the message that I want to leave as my legacy to the world?
Mm. Hmm. I'm gonna share 2 pieces that I think bookend each other. The first is when this idea of self permission started to crystallize in my head, which was many years ago when I was working in Zimbabwe on HIV/AIDS related work. So my background is in the field of social change. Spent a couple of decades in that space of you know really wicked problems, lots of money being thrown at them, me as bright-eyed change agent going around sharing lots of things, lots of facts, lots of wisdom, lots of frameworks, lots of money, lots of t-shirts. And I got to a point where we were in Zimbabwe, height of the AIDS epidemic. It was the late 90s. And we were throwing everything at it. And by all accounts, it wasn't sticking. And I said to my boss at the time, like, we can give people all sorts of stimulus to change. We can't give them permission. So my presence in their lives was not enough for them to green light themselves to make choices they'd never made before. To, as I often describe it, to like be the first in their family. So we were talking to women, for instance, about, um, how they should negotiate condom use with their husbands. This was something women in their culture didn't do that. So we want one of these average women to be the first person to do that. That's a big ask, right? And she's got to really come to grips with herself about, "Phew, I'm going to do this. I'm going to step out of my comfort and do this." So, I realized that all this external sort of pressure and logic was not enough to penetrate into a very deeply held sense of identity within a certain context. And none of what we had to offer was going to sufficiently as I said, sort of green light people to go, yeah, I'm going to do that. It was a much deeper and complex negotiation with self. So I left that role because I just sat there kind of going, this is this isn't working. And frankly, no amount of money is going to be the permission giver in the end. So it kind of started to percolate in me like what would that look like? And as, I'm going to flash forward to when I was on one of the first drafts of the book and my mother died. Um during that process, and I sat next to her as she passed away and had so many thoughts about this woman whose life was incredibly circumscribed by a story of what women were allowed to be at that time. And as a young woman, like, I knew it. I knew that she was miserable in a lot of ways, that she didn't have a lot of choices, that she never had financial independence. There were so many things. And if you talk about, when something went from this is an interesting idea to if I leave anything in the world to women, to my children, to anybody who's watching, it's, you know, if you are lucky enough to have choices,
Mm.
and in this world that where a lot of our norms, for better or for worse, are unraveling, we have so many choices. We have to make them because we don't get a second chance. We are unbelievably privileged to live in societies, most of us, where the threat of making different choices is not what it was for those Zimbabwean women, where it was actually unbelievably hard. And part of the premise of the book is that, the world is chaotic and that's creating space. So are we going to keep dragging around old scripts and stories that we know don't work for us now, but we don't feel allowed to rewrite them or come up with our own? Or are we going to step into this moment and say, I think there might be something better for me, which doesn't have to be exotic or grand, but it just has to be a greater match for your own sense of desire and your own sense of person and place. So, yeah, so much happened during the writing of the book that kind of made me go, oh, you know, um, we have an opportunity now that I think is unique, and we can talk more about how I think this moment, as much as it's scary, is actually creating space, and we need to figure out how we're going to use that space.
Mhm. I would actually love to talk about that, to explore the power of chaos and
Mm,
creating a different life, because so many of us think that chaos is it's closing the door, right? Many people become smaller as the
yeah.
external world becomes more chaotic, and
Hmm.
there are people like yourself, like myself, that guide ourselves and others into, well, you can navigate this gracefully and you can navigate this with an expansive mindset and an expansive body that
Hmm.
allows you to actually reclaim the truth of the moment, reclaim that which is meaningful for you, and, well, discover it first of all, and then reclaim it. So I would love for you to say a little bit more about that from your experience on how chaos becomes permission, and permission to what?
Mm,
As Yeah, let's go with that. That'd be really good.
yeah. I mean, one of what I the framing of the book is the what I'm describing as the great unraveling, this sense that I think we are living through, which anytime we want it to kind of go stop, it just takes another step forward, which is so many of the structures, the norms, the conventions that shaped our understanding of how things work are unraveling. Some of which we're like, "Yay, this is exciting." And I pick things that are mundane from when I was growing up and, stores closed at a certain hour to, oh, now things are open 24 hours and it's on demand, to 9 to 5 becoming 7 to 8. So, we've moved from a period where there were very fixed ways of operating to far more fluid ways of operating. And again, some of it we've experienced as a kind of liberation, as a sense of freedom, as a power, a lot of that in kind of a sense of being a consumer. And I think COVID opened the door to that conversation in the world of work. Oh, wait a second. Maybe I don't have to sit there in order to be productive. Maybe I can work on my own terms. And I think we're navigating a lot of this in our own selves and in our conversations all the time. You know, we have fluid identities, if you will. And that is, as we all know, being discussed at the highest levels of cultural discourse. I think it's part of what's leading to this backlash now of the nostalgia for when things were more fixed and we felt like we knew our place and we felt like we knew how things operated. Um, what we have right now is a place where there's far more choice. We can curate things, we can curate things, and we love doing that. But, you know, as I say in the book, it's one thing to curate your coffee and say, I want a double shot, non-fat, da da da. Da. It's a whole other thing to curate your career, where it's like, oh, wait a second. You mean I'm going to get to possibly make many choices over the course of my life about what I do, where I work, how I work, and I've got to make them? I've got to decide what matters for me, what's important for me. Um, and I think that's where a lot of the sense of deep, you know, burnout and anxiety comes from is that, as I say in the book, there's no way. It's gone from follow the way, that linear way, to find your own way. Do it how you want to do it. You're allowed. We have more and more sort of examples of that, but that requires me as an individual to do that and to back myself and to say, you know, I'll take an example of somebody with an almost 18-year-old son. College used to be a given if you wanted a career. Now, up for grabs. Should you? Shouldn't you? Should I spend the money on that? Should I not? So many things that were considered requirements in a previous time are now choices. And, you know, as I talk about, we've kind of moved from a world of requirements and guarantees where if you did this, then you were almost guaranteed that. So my choices were clear, and I trusted that if I made them, I'd get a predictable and desired outcome. That is not the case anymore. You know, I describe it as going from an if then world to a what if world. What, well, I don't know. What if I go to college? What if I don't go? What's going to happen? Like nobody knows. So I think it feels like chaos. It feels like, oh, I don't know what the right thing is anymore. And I've got to decide that for myself. I get to decide that for myself. So I think it's a reckoning for individual desire and agency. But given the fact that most of us have never been raised to lean into those things, we can kind of fumble and stumble our way through it and not really own the moment and say, all right, I'm going to do this my way and I'm going to back myself and I'm going to believe in myself. Screw it, I'm not going to college. Okay, so what are you going to do? Okay, well, I'm going to forge a different path. So, you know, the unraveling of the requirements and guarantees, the predictable linear paths that delivered on status and security is very unsettling. But it also creates an opportunity for us to create paths for ourselves that are a far more, you know, authentic and accurate reflection of our individuality, of our uniqueness, of what we actually want to do rather than what we're supposed to do. But it requires you, using my language, giving yourself a lot of permission because we are programmed to, you know, default to the ways that things always have worked. And now it's like, phew, we've got to do a lot of work with ourselves to take advantage of this moment. Otherwise, it's just going to eat us alive. We're just going to be awash with uncertainty and anxiety because there's no guarantees of any choices that we're making. But I think if we can find a way to step into ourselves, there's a far more, vast array of possibilities for how to create a life for yourself that aren't, the restrictive ones of the past.
Mhm.
But that requires you, really coming into self
Mhm.
and navigating your own way forward.
Mhm. Wow. There's a lot that you said there. Yeah.
It was a lot. I gave you just a little thumbnail sketch of the entire premise of the book. That's all.
Yeah, exactly, which is great, right? Like it's a fabulous read. Um, and I have a lot of notes from it. I just we're going where we're going. So one of the things that you said right now was the notion of, well, a few things. So one is I have to reclaim my own authority.
Mhm.
So this, let's call it podcast, this exploration that I create is boundless leader self. So I must be both willing and able to lead myself into my own emergence, into my own future, into my own creations. And between that possibility unfolding, there's a whole lot of shoulds. There's a whole lot
Mm.
of stories. There's a whole lot of um, desire for control. So when I
Yeah.
hear you speaking to chaos, on the other side of that is the desire for control, right? So as the world is quite frankly polarizing, in one extreme, there's no identity, there's no gender, there's nothing really
Mhm.
real. On the other hand, is this humongous pull to, no, no, clamp down and let's go back
Right.
to the good old days that worked for one particular type of person.
Right. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
the thing that you were talking about and the woman's vision is in my mind, right? I don't know the woman you're talking about, and yet I can see her clearly where you're asking her to put boundaries around a reality that has never existed for her as a possibility.
Right.
The first comes the introduction of the possibility,
Mm.
then comes the opportunity to give yourself permission to notice, what do I want?
Right.
Right?
Right.
What matters to me? Because it might be evident to someone in, North America that, well, a condom might save your life. But for someone who's in that experience, right, who's living it day to day, it's no different than whoever is listening telling your husband, no, I don't want to, right?
Right.
Declaring a boundary that is other than the status quo that honors the truth of our own experience.
Right.
So permission is one of the most difficult things to give ourselves, particularly when it comes to about ourselves in a world of collapse. So I'm very mindful, like we're living in a point in reality where things are polarizing and systems of institutions, thoughts, all of these things are crumbling.
Mm.
In the process of crumbling, there are going to be those people that are going to notice and they're going to cave in on themselves and try to hold on. And then there's
Yeah.
gonna be those people that choose, because it is a choice, right? That
Mhm.
choose to give themselves permission to notice, "Okay, I have a choice here.
Right.
I might choose collapse because everybody around me is choosing collapse, or I might choose something else, and I don't know what that else is."
Mm.
So, one of the things that you said in your book that I fell in love with was this idea of burning the rule book, right? We have all of these rules about who we should be and who our children should be and what things they should, never ending shoulds, right? And
Mm.
nobody teaches us that those things are not real. Like
Yeah,
those
they're
things are
constructed.
exactly, they're as
Mhm.
real as the culture that you live in. And if you move, a different country, as you've had the privilege of doing, you'll notice that
Mm.
those stories are different. Those scripts are different,
Absolutely.
right?
Right.
For me, what remains the same in all the scripts from all the women I've worked with in all corners of the globe is this notion that I'm powerless.
Right.
So, how would you speak to someone that is curious about their own power and
Mm.
discovering it, embracing it, embodying it
Mm.
through the process of permission?
Yeah. Let me back in, if you will, because when you were talking, I kept thinking about I mean, when I say that I think about the women I worked with in Zimbabwe a lot, I'm really not being dramatic because, my book about that time is called Shame. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I think you're being really hard on yourself because you were there doing really good things." And I was like, "Yeah, but in that example, we entered into these women's lives with a very narrow lens because that's what we were interested in. We were interested in HIV/AIDS. We were not interested in those women. We didn't know their context. We didn't know their stories. We weren't interested in their passion or anything. Our conversation was narrow and it was, go girl, you can do this,
Right.
in a complete vacuum of care, interest, support around, as you've just described, them just being women beyond this issue and beyond this massive ask that we were making of them to basically blow up the conventions of their relationship in order to do something that we said would make them safe. So, a lot of I walked away from that job, by the way. I left, I quit. And so much of what I spent time afterwards thinking about was that we often go to these high stakes situations immediately. We do with ourselves, we did in that field, like without any attempt to engage with the granularity of life beyond those high stakes decisions. We go straight there. And guess what? It doesn't work because the way I've thought about it before is that it's like doing a high jump from a standing position. It's like you can't do this. You have no lived experience in your own capacity of giving yourself permission to do other low stakes things, of exploring power on your own terms that have nothing to do with anybody else. So I really, and I'm releasing a kind of practice of permission, and this whole year for me is about the practice of permission. For me, it starts in ways that are completely about yourself, that nobody else even has to know about, like actually, because it doesn't all have to be some grand gesture that confronts, the architecture of your life. In fact, I don't even think it should be. Um,
Mhm.
it should be you engaging. Let's start with the question of desire, because for me, all power originates from desire. It cannot originate anywhere else. How could it? Like, the best things in our lives are products of things we want. The most satisfying experiences, the most impactful engagements are when we are locked into a desire to do something, be something, create something, eat, whatever. So I think for me, that's the origin of so much of the disconnect with agency and will, is that we were taught very early on to disconnect from our desires.
Mm.
And I think there's a huge amount that we, especially as women, can do simply to engage with our own desire. And yes, I mean at a super simple level, from, you know, food, music. I would put it into a giant category called leisure
Mm.
and say, what makes you feel good? What lights you up? What brings you a sense of being in your body and being in your unique self? Go do that. You don't need anybody else's permission to do that. Before you start talking to your partner, mother, whoever, child, about who you are, just engage with yourself, because you cannot show up to other people and have big conversations about who you are and what you want if you haven't spent a lot of time with yourself. It doesn't all have to be big and deep and heavy. In fact, it can be the opposite, because I think, again, we as women often have spent a long time absent of just feeding ourselves, literally kind of lighting ourselves up. Um, and we can explore this more, but I came away from my whole time of working in development with, it's always about pain and it's always high stakes. And I literally want to flip that on its head and say, what if we start to find our way forward through pleasure, through small things, through stuff that starts to make us feel like the locus of control is back into ourselves. Um, so yes, I would say that it's just time with self and story, and we can talk more about what that might look like in real life. But whew, don't leave your husband, quit your job, move your house without having spent a significant amount of time, whatever that looks like for you, just engaging with self and desire and what these things feel like for you. Let me stop there.
So there's this thing around a cell. So a cell can either be in a protective mode, self-protection, or it can be in an expansive mode.
Mm,
So I love that you brought that in because so many women, at least that's been my experience in life and working with women, is that they go into a particular kind of stance where they feel they have to protect themselves.
mm,
And the protection comes from all kinds of places. So it could be external for sure, like a husband or a child or work or whatever, but it's also internal, right? Because there's protection from the voices in our head that repeat on a loop and we don't know how to stop them.
mhm,
So when you live your life from that's a space of avoiding pain, and the irony in the whole thing is that you end up recreating more pain because you're trying to avoid pain, and it's like, don't think about a pink elephant,
right,
right?
right,
So
right.
your nervous system cannot hear no, it can only hear pink elephant,
Mm,
danger.
mm,
So that's one way to live. And then another way to live is exactly what you're talking about, which is the expansive way to live. So all of this might be true, sure. And everybody's got voices. Like I've got voices, you've got voices, but we're choosing, and it is a choice. We're choosing to take a quote unquote risk. I don't know if you
mhm,
mentioned, I have that word written down. I don't know if you wrote it in your
mm,
book. Okay. So
mm.
I take good notes. Um,
You do. You do.
this this notion of risking into the adventure that is life,
Mhm.
right? Like our
Yeah.
life is an adventure. We don't If we follow the scripts, one, they're going to lead to the predetermined outcomes. So like you shared about your mother, right? Like she followed
Mhm.
the scripts and there's a predetermined outcome at the end of that, and that's
Yep.
what it that's one way to live. Not for me. Another way to live is one where you don't know the predetermined outcome because the future has not yet happened. And yet, in a holographic mind that can envision and project into the future the possibility, the nervous system relaxes into that possibility and then you can actually create it. So you can't create it without permission to see the vision. You can't create
Yep.
it without the opportunity to actually notice the things that you might be unwilling to have noticed from the past. And
Right.
I think what you're talking about, you don't have to blow up your life. And I found myself writing this more in my blogs recently where it's like, disclaimer, guys, like, you don't have to burn it all to the ground. Like, you don't have to agree with me. You just take a nugget that enlivens you, take a nugget that moves you forward, take a nugget that you can actually move with intention forward.
Mm.
So I really,
100%.
yeah, and it's like when the drive is desire, this really lights me up, Jill, I have to tell you. Because
Good.
it's like you said, it's like everything we do, it's like avoidance of pain. Anybody studying
Mhm.
writing and, it's like focus on the pain.
Mm.
And I love that you flip that on its head and you go, actually, no, let's focus on movement forward. Let's focus on
Mhm.
intentional progression in a direction that's meaningful. So you get to choose what that is. So it could start with, I really like chocolate. you
Yeah.
know,
Please. Please start there. Please.
exactly.
Please
or,
start there.
or like, my pleasure matters, right? Like how
Mhm.
many women lay in a bed where they're rigid and cold. And it's like, no, no, my pleasure matters, dude. So like, let's do what we need to do for this to be what it needs to be for me.
Mm.
And we're not really taught to do that, right? Like that's not a thing that we do. So,
No, but even, again, I'm gonna direct us back to lower stakes choices that we are free to make without anybody else intervening. So I want people to spend quite a lot of time there.
mm,
Nobody else needs to say whether it's okay for me to do this. Like, max out in that space before you ever get to a point where you've got to then go to your husband or go to your boss or go to your business partner and then start negotiating with them,
mm,
because you are building up muscle. You are building up a capability within self to repattern. So for me, when I start to get more into the practice of this, there's a neuroscientific element to this, which is, as the neuroscientist who's working with me on it describes, self permission as self directed neuroplasticity. So
mm,
you are repatterning something that you are maybe to greater or lesser degrees conscious is a pretty ingrained way of seeing and being that you feel safe in. And everything you're trying to do is repattern into a space where you begin to, and create a new neural pathway, create a new way of seeing yourself move through space that doesn't feel scary, that doesn't feel like, because at a deep level, this is about staying safe and being accepted. And part of what we're talking about here is slowly, and that's relative, beginning to move greater into spaces where you realize that you are allowed to want, to acknowledge that want, to act on it, to even demand it, if you will. Now, again, that can start really, really small, because there are so many people who simply, if the words I want come out of their mouth, they're immediately uncomfortable. Like, they can't even, and I wrote about it quite a lot this week. Like, how many people have you sat with where you say, "What do you want for lunch?" And like, "I don't know. What do you want? I don't know. What do you want? What do you want? What do you like?" And we've been taught explicitly and implicitly that somehow that's almost like good manners, or
mm,
it's being a nice person, it's kind of accommodating, and it's looking around at everybody else before you look at yourself. So, one of the very silly things I talk about is look at the menu, pick something, put it down. I want a burger. That's what I'm having. Not, oh my gosh, is Stella going to think I'm a pig because I ate it? Or is anybody else having one? Or, oh, I mean, women aren't supposed to eat burgers now, are they? Like, just that is repatterning. That is muscle building. That is agency claiming. Do not dismiss the work that that is doing on your brain and on your nervous system to start to say, okay, now I am not saying for a second that, clarity in ordering lunch is going to lead you to be able to walk into a high stakes situation immediately and begin to articulate that, or that you should do those big high stakes decisions without seeking the input of others if it's relevant, if it has a material impact on the decision. But there's a very powerful kind of capability and familiarity you are creating with your own desire. And you can, stay in that space for quite a long time. Like, you will start to get a lot more pleasure, and you will start to lower the kind of dissonance in your head that wastes a lot of energy worrying about whether what you want is okay, or outsourcing it to everybody else. And you start to kind of feel, a clarity of thought, a sort of strengthening of will that is very beneficial once it starts to compound. So, um, when you talk about adventure, I think, I go, yay. Some people go, "Ooh," but adventure is relative. So if I start to say life is an adventure, then for me, that might be, so why am I not going to see that jazz concert on a Saturday night? It doesn't need to be, so why have I not quit my job?
mhm,
Because that's what we always go to straight away. It's like, let's start building out really fulfilling lives that feed
mhm,
us and nurture us and make us feel alive.
mm,
With that as our platform, we can deal with some of the other stuff, but guess what? If you have a satisfying life on many, many levels, you're going to be in a much better position to deal with that work issue or that relationship issue or that family issue. Um, but that's not something that we've ever really been encouraged to do, and particularly not over the last 2 decades when our professional identities have pretty much taken over our lives, and we were told that that was everything.
Mm.
So, I think that it's yeah, I'm suggesting something quite different here.
Mhm.
Like small, pleasurable, build up agency, micro permissions that start to repattern who you think you are, what you think you're allowed. This is about capability building, not problem solving. And I want everybody to write that down because if your brain instantly goes into problem solving, it's instantly high stakes.
Mhm.
It's instantly before and after. I need to fix this. And the problem with that mindset is that once you've fixed this problem, whatever it is, you've changed your job, you're in a new job, but you're exactly the same person who was in the old one.
Mhm.
So you are relying entirely on a change of conditions to change to build capability. And in fact, yes, it will because you've made some big, important decisions. But I would love for people to spend more time on some of the stuff around those big decisions before they felt they had to launch themselves into that kind of stuff.
Mhm. I love this. It speaks to the word that I wrote down as you were talking was capacity.
Mm,
And that's, capacity to want, because that can be cultivated. And that's capacity to create, and that's capacity to choose, and that's capacity for at all levels within which we operate. It's becoming mindful of creating capacity to engage our own life in a meaningful way. So, one of the things that you talk about in the book that I'd like for you to explore if you're willing is this notion of I am versus I can.
mm,
Is I heard it right now as you were speaking, and it's a complex one that I would love to unpack with you because from my perspective, from a logical levels perspective, the higher up we go and the more we expand our capacity, the more we expand our context, right? For who we are, what we are, how we move through the world. The more we expand that context, the easier it is to choose, the easier it is
mm,
to create that capacity. And at the same time, that can be a big ask when people are not ready to shift their identity. So, an identity shift will lead to greater capacity because the more you're aligned with the truth of who you are and you align with that, the easier it is for you to make choices in alignment. And the caveat there is that I can't make choices in alignment because fill in the blank. And so, what you're saying is, or how I'm hearing it, and I love your perspective, is I can make a small choice.
mhm.
I can make a choice that aligns with my moment, right? Like the moment that I'm in. And by doing that repeatedly, I become more capable. So I expand further and further as I continue to engage more challenging life situations. Right. So it's not I'm
Yeah.
going to leave my husband. It's I'm going to go sleep in the other bed tonight. Right. Or whatever it
Mhm,
happens to be. It's like that moment of this is what matters to me in this moment. I don't have to make these
mhm.
life altering choices, but I do have to make the choice right here, right now that alters my life.
Right. Or that remains as true to my internal
Mm,
compass, my internal self as possible. I
mhm,
think that what most of us experience is a disconnect between the internal and the external. I perform. I'm performing. I'm performing something that I think I should be.
mhm,
I mean, that's human existence, and I think the chaos of the moment is inviting us to drop the performance because not because we're wild and woke and empowered per se, but because the performance doesn't pay off the way it used to,
mm,
right? It used to be that performing things got you, in theory, stability and security and status. That's what my mother thought,
mm,
right? So the exchange that she made with herself at whatever point was, I'm gonna stifle my desires and my interests in exchange for financial security, status of being a wife and a mother. And, that for that point in that world, that was understandable because there weren't a lot of other choices for her to make, and they all felt hugely risky. Um, and I think part of what I'm talking about in the book is what I think we're all experiencing now, which is this kind of um, uncoupling of identity from the roles that we take on, from ready-made roles. I am doctor, I
Mm.
am lawyer, I am wife, that defined our sense of who we are and what we are capable of, um, towards something that understands that I am becoming all the time, that I can't be fixed in place by one identity that in a previous world I chose fairly early in life because I was supposed to, and then I stayed in it. And that's who I was for the remainder of my days. And I think so many of the people that have reached out to me, interestingly, after the book, who read it, come into that I am versus I can, where they're like, actually, there's so many other things that I want to do or be. I have a wide range of interests. I actually have a wide range of capabilities, but I don't want to be accountant until the day that I leave my office for the last time. I am more than that. I can be more than that. And guess what? In a world where a lot of those old identities that were very secure ones, because again, they bought us security and status, are now disappearing in front of our eyes. AI is taking them over. So they don't buy us what they used to. We actually have to be much more agile in our understanding of what we're capable of doing. Right. So when I talk to young people about this, it's like, okay, I'm not saying you shouldn't go to university and study accounting anymore, although I'm guessing within my lifetime that will probably disappear as a degree that humans will study for a number of years or whatever. Go and study it because it's still a useful set of tools to have. Like all these things are tools that you are using to construct your offer to the world at various times. So when you leave college, you're not going to say, I am accountant and that's who I will go and be. And I'm going to go and look for somebody who wants accountant to come and sit at a desk. And it's like I talk to them about, okay, imagine you now have a big, and use your own metaphor, backpack, toolkit, whatever it is, and you are filling it all the time with experience, technical skills, knowledge, which you have the ability to shape and reshape depending upon where you are in your life, what's happening in the world, to make different offers. So, I had a guy who was a dentist who was like, at some point, he was like, I just can't do this anymore. I don't want to be a dentist anymore. And of course, cue the outrage and confusion amongst his closest family. Like, what do you mean you're a dentist? And he was like, I don't think I only have to be a dentist. Like, I think I can be more. And so we sat down and started to look what being a dentist had taught him, what he knew how to do. And his own sense of, you talk about expansive. So it goes from this to like, oh, wait a second. It's taught me a lot of stuff that's actually broadly applicable. And, the whole move now is towards portfolio careers and all sorts of different things. So it's not a seamless transition from, I've been a dentist all my life to the next thing, but he started to plot a way forward that was, more about him taking what he knew how to do within the field of, personal care and medicine and marrying it up with a bunch of other things to get closer to something that felt like who he wanted to be. He actually wanted to work in sort of general health and wellness and not just be a dentist. So I think for me, it plays out at a broader identity level, which is I'm not going to be fixed in place by one external role. And then, as you said, it comes down to the granular level of the belief that we can make choices that align with our, our sense of evolving desire and evolving need within a given place and time. And both of those, I think, can feel quite like a lot. I mean, we weren't raised to do that. Nobody told us we could. They didn't tell us we couldn't, not explicitly, but nothing about, the 20th century story was, you are an evolving human who's going to
Mm,
amass skills and capabilities over the course of your life that you will have the opportunity to, you know, repackage and retool as you go.
mhm,
And I think that's the moment that we're living in. That's the 21st century reality, which is we are going to get to become different things. We have to think of ourselves as an evolving self because if we get too stuck in place, we can quickly become irrelevant. And I think there are a lot of 40 something, 50 something year old people out there right now sitting around going, yikes, I'm worried that I'm about to be made irrelevant. In fact, my entire role, my entire job category is about to disappear. And yet, nobody has ever prepared me for a moment where I would have to find my way forward in a far more creative and agile way. And I think that's the moment that we're in. And that starts with a whole lot of I can.
mm,
That does not start with I am and then running around saying, who wants me? That's okay. I can do a number of different things. I've got to figure out what they are.
mhm. So I love that you brought that in terms of there's no moment, there's no experience, there's no relationship, there's no anything that's lost, right? Like,
Mm,
there's nothing that was wasted, there's nothing that was irrelevant, there's always something to be discovered from having engaged whatever that was. So whether
right?
that's being a dentist or for me in my case, getting my master's degree in criminology and working in the victimology field for all those years or becoming a, federal government worker in policy work and now far more enriching, far more enlivening explorations of mind, right? Explorations of emergence, explorations of becoming and working with the world's most incredible women who are
Mm,
increasingly more willing as they become more able, right? As they're more willing, they become more able to actually live different lives. And
mm,
one of the things that I'm interested in exploring is there's this moment of a splitting up that I believe is happening. And in this moment, there's going to be a lot of, um, chaotic transitions, if you will,
mm.
and we're living in the midst of that. Some people are noticing, some people are not noticing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There will come a moment where those not noticing will wake up to what's actually going on, and you talk in your book about anger and fear that the
Mm,
millennials have experienced, right? Which is different than the previous generation, the baby boomers, where it was like, "I wanna take 3 trips around the world, and I can because why not?" Right? There was no, moment of pause for them. And
mm,
enter the millennials, which is my generation, and we have been conditioned from moment 1 to believe that whatever is happening out there is the baby boomers' fault, right? Like,
mm.
they
Okay.
did. And
Mm,
so there's this generational clash that's happening,
mm, mm,
and the children, the next generation, whatever it's called, there's this moment where they're experiencing life as, what's the point, right? Like,
mm,
what's the point? Completely defeated and defeatist and in this internal state of it doesn't fucking matter, right? This kind of
mm,
like having given up. So there's this very being in the middle of this whole thing and bearing witness to it all and the inevitable anger and the fear that's actually accumulating rage rather than anger, really, because it's much more deeply rooted. And
mm,
bearing witness to the unfolding of all of this and being in the middle of it and noticing that, okay. this is happening. This
Mm,
splitting up, this bifurcation in the world is happening. And there's going to be many, many shifts that I cannot prepare for because I
mm-mm,
don't know what the shifts are going to be. Right?
mm,
Like, I don't have a script. I don't have the predictable rule book that so many
mm-mm,
have relied upon until now. It does not exist.
mm-mm,
So the more I cling on to the idea that there is a rule book and I need to follow it because my mother thinks I should, the more difficult it becomes for you to actually navigate your reality as it is,
right.
right?
Yep.
In the moment that you're in. So this notion of really reclaiming everything that's in my backpack is meaningful, has brought me to where I am right here, right now, and I can pull from it whatever it is that I want to pull from it to create an intentional life, to
Mm,
evolve by intention. That's how we in the well systems world navigate the world is evolution by intention. And that
mm,
demands an awakening to everything that lives in me. I have everything inside of me that I need and want to navigate my reality, whatever it happens to be.
mm.
So, thank you for bringing that in because it was such a powerful way for me to look at the intergenerational play in how the scripts have been downloaded, right? How the
Mm,
scripts have been
mm.
downloaded in each generation and how that shapes their belief systems. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's still a dominant script that, I still think the late 20th century script still sits in the background of a lot of people. It still animates people's sense of self.
Mhm.
And that is still a trajectory that even though most of us it doesn't match our lived experience, we still kind of sort of accept it as the gold standard or believe that that's what good looks like. It's still linear. It's still accumulative, and as you say, we then start to judge ourselves and question ourselves if our path doesn't look like that. What's wrong with me? I have all these different degrees, or, I was a criminologist and then I was this, and I'm all over the place. No, you're not. No, you're not. Like, and it's also, as you say, it's not to continue to kind of demonize boomers. I'm Gen X. They were living within a specific set of circumstances.
Exactly.
That's all. We're all adapting to different sets of circumstances. So they made choices that made sense for that moment. Of course they did. Now, it doesn't mean that, their choices remain the right ones. They remain correct for them at that time. And I think a lot of, for me, where we need to enter into these intergenerational conversations is with the curiosity around adaptation and the ways in which we are adapting to a world that is not rewarding us in the same way for the choices that my, father made or my mother made. It is a world in which we have a wider range of choices. None of them is going to offer the firm guarantees that they got. And that's where I think the anger lies.
Mm,
I want a guarantee. I
mm,
want to know that if I go to X university and get X degree, I have bought myself security. And the reality that it cannot be bought through a set of ironclad choices anymore leaves us feeling, because they're still in our rearview mirror, these people and these stories and this life where you could, like, it leaves us feeling a little like, damn it, like, wow, I don't get to do that. And I think the nostalgia is for the predictability. I don't think it's actually for their lives. I mean, we all know enough to know that that generation was repressed and, this and that. So we have this moment where we don't have to exchange personal satisfaction for security per se. You can. It's not necessarily promising to deliver in the way that it used to. Like, put your head down and go and get some bog standard degree does not guarantee anything anymore. So the incentive for denying your own interests, desires, intents is not nearly as high as it used to be. So one of the things that I talk about the book is that what used to feel like the purview of a few adventurous types who really wanted to pursue their own, growth and were willing to step off the prescribed path. It's like there is no path. There isn't one. And that makes us feel scared
Mhm.
because we want to believe that if we do the right thing, we'll be rewarded for it. And what we have experienced over the past, start in 2008, start whenever you want to start, was you can do all the right things and still get screwed. It's not a meritocracy. It's not a this. So I think that's part of the nostalgia is, can we go back to a time like that? But actually, let's let go and let's be now and figure out how to make the best of this reality because there's no going back. It's only accelerating. Like,
Mhm.
we're living that literally in the past 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Like, it's just accelerating. So, longing for predictability is a recipe for deep anxiety and sadness. We've got to accept that this is the way it is now.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. One thing that I would like to reframe because they're really all meaning is context dependent, right? So the context
Mhm.
shapes the meaning of what is being experienced. So you said doing the right thing will not get you rewarded. And I love the distinction between the right thing that's culturally conditioned from the past, pre-approved.
Correct.
I think you call them
Yeah,
pre-approved.
pre-approved. Yes,
Pre-approved traditions.
pre-approved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the right thing for myself, right?
Right.
Like the right thing for my emergence will necessarily, I believe, because I live it, reward me because it's
Yes.
leading me to my meaningful life, right? Like every choice I make that's in alignment, every choice I make that, when I'm scared or when I'm uncertain or when I'm terrified or when I'm nostalgic. And I was watching a movie and I was watching the Greek islands and the water in the Greek islands. And yeah, I'm nostalgic about that. That's where my ancestors are buried, right? Like that's where
Mhm.
the bones of my people are. That's what lives as vibrant in my body. Meanwhile, I live in the snow, right? It's like, how do you be in that moment of nostalgia and recognize it for what it is, right?
Mm.
Recognize it for that was and isn't and will never be what I think it was. So for parents, my parents are refugees and they've experienced this. They moved back to Albania. They didn't last all of 6 months, and then they came back because there's no home there.
Mm.
There's this idea of a home that
Mm.
was and isn't, but there's no home as they've envisioned it. And so from where I stand, looking at all of this, right? Like looking at what's going on in the world, what's going on with my parents, what people are talking about, my own experience, and noticing, okay, all of this is true. The context for all of this is truth, right? Like this all coexists as truth in this moment for me specifically. And as I choose to look at it for what it is, I also choose to be rooted in the moment that I'm in, grounded and present in the moment that I'm in so that I can see the vision of all of it without being pulled in any particular direction that says that's the right way. Right? Like, oh, I have a nostalgic moment about the beach and I'm like, I got to pack up my stuff and go. Well,
Yeah.
that's not quite how it works. How it works, you stay in the moment that you're in. You have to give yourself permission to stay in the moment that you're in, and that is how you reclaim your personal power because the moment that you're in is the option for you to be able to see what was, what is, and what could be, right? So it's
Mm.
that reach for potential lives in and through the moment, not the stories of the past or of our parents or of society, because society continues to insist on its own way when we're literally like like c- crumbling, right? Like
Mm.
institutions are crumbling. I feel like this is a tower moment that we're living through. And so many of us are committed to putting the pieces of the bricks back into the wall as opposed to noticing, I'm going to walk away now.
Mm.
I'm going to walk away.
Yeah, I'm gonna allow myself to imagine that maybe there's something else that I can't see yet. I don't know what it is. Because I think, part of the most daring thing for us, I think, as individuals, in societies, as collectives, is at this moment daring to think about maybe there's got to be a whole other way for me to imagine my career, for me to imagine what a corporate might look like, or you know, what success is on my own terms. I mean, this is little mini acts of daring when, again, there are not models and examples of this, when, as you say, the possibility is totally in the moment, because nobody can give you a picture and say, oh yeah, if you just do this, you'll create that. Like, eh, eh, so you've got to really feel your way towards something and let it emerge. And again, nothing about the way that we are brought into becoming adults tells us that that's okay. We pick things that have predictably safe outcomes, and then we just carry on in that direction. And that's where I think now it's kind of like there's things that are falling apart, there are things that are emerging, and we can't make sense of either of them completely.
Mhm.
So we've got to be in this space. And, I often, as I was writing this and as I think about it, I often go back to kind of the physical experience of moving through something. And, to me, it's like the equivalent of having gone from a time when you were walking down well paved paths. You got to choose them. It was for me like being in a nature reserve or something where there's, pick the path you want to go on. Somebody's already walked it. And so your stance is going to be, oh, let me see the one I want to be on. Let me choose that. And then I'm relaxed. I've got to be aware, but I'm not, I'm essentially just rewarded for a degree of, direction following,
Mhm.
endurance if it's a long one, but I'm relaxed because I know that somebody's done the work of finding the way already. That's not where we are at this moment. A lot of us as individuals, as young people, as citizens of a world where we're in the woods.
Mm.
There's no path. My job right now is not to look around for which paved path I should take. I am literally finding my way.
Mhm.
And that requires a very different stance, doesn't it? I have to be hugely alert. And as you say, very in the moment to kind of be looking around. There's a degree of vigilance, which I think we're experiencing and we're a little bit exhausted by right now. We got to learn quickly. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, I can't see that. Da, 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 da. We've got to do a lot of work like calming ourselves down because we can't see that far ahead. And we don't know if this is right. We don't know where this is heading. And, I've had experiences like that in my life and on a physical level. And I know that they are draining
Mhm.
in a way that, walking up a mountain is just, it's taxing in a different way. It's not taxing emotionally or in a sort of central nervous system way. But that's, I think, what a lot of people are feeling. They were feeling that, forget about, the world. A lot of people, I think, are feeling that just in their own lives, in their own sort of careers, where as parents or as, you know, partners to people of like, okay, we don't have a formula here. We're figuring it out all the time. And as you said, the I think that's one of my permissions is why I came to the permission of sort of think small. Like it's much more of a, going like this and looking around corners and figuring things out versus expecting, okay, I'm going to have a clear line of sight here. Hopefully you get to those places and clear line of sight might be months, maybe it's years, I don't know. I don't think any of us feels like we're in that moment right now. But we need to come into this and accept the fact that it's going to be a while for us to be taking small steps. And that's okay. It's got to be.
Mm.
Um and get used to it and don't feel like there's something wrong with you. I get a lot of young people who've sort of read the book or are interested in the topic who are like, I don't have a 5-year plan. And I think there's something wrong with me. And I'm like, I don't know anybody who has a 5-year plan right now. Like that feels like 1985, frankly,
Mm,
not 2025.
mhm,
Okay. It's okay. We can let go of the idea that we have to have this big overarching plan and accept the fact that we're going to be working in shorter time frames, probably being far more nimble than our parents or grandparents necessarily had to be.
mm.
We might not like that, but I think it's real and it's time to settle into it. And it's time to settle into the word you used earlier, which is there is a degree of adventure in it. It
Mhm.
might not feel great. We might wish that we could go back to having the cruise control button on in our, big fat Cadillac moving down the highway of life, knowing that everything was going to be okay. But I don't think that is returning. And this is a feature of 21st century life that we need to sort of um, begin to accept in our bodies and not fight it or feel like there's something wrong with us because our lives don't look or feel the way that we think they should or thought they would.
So, one of the things that came to mind as you were speaking here about, you know, we hold on to a version of reality that we think was,
Hmm.
and it's through a particular perceptual filter that says it was better then, right? Like the
Right.
grass is greener on the other side and all that sort of stuff. And I'm noticing, for example, the number one dying regret of people is that they didn't live more authentic lives.
Mm,
They didn't align more with their inner truth. So, as you're speaking about, you know, keeping things small, which is
mm,
necessary in order to be able to create a different reality in a physical realm,
right.
I wrote down permission to pivot and leap, right? So,
Mm,
like taking this leap of faith into an unknown because we don't know the details of what it's going to look like. So, that demands that we stay awake.
yeah. Yeah.
So, that's one of the most annoying things about living this way, right? It's like you actually have to keep your eyes open, and you actually have to notice your surroundings, you have to notice your internal state, you have to notice your thoughts, you have to notice what do I wanna keep and, like, what's my mother's voice? Because that's not
Mm,
mine or whatever it happens to be, and it's like this permission to leap into a reality that I create.
mm,
I am the creator of my reality and I choose to create it in this way. And I will respond to external circumstances, no doubt, because, if the banks collapse, well, I'm going to be affected by this, right? But I don't have to lose myself in the process of all of this happening externally because I know that I'll be okay, right? Like that
yeah.
deep inner trust. And I'm going to navigate whatever reality shows up and it's gonna be not so easy, right? It's not gonna be easy for any of us because as
No.
things collapse, we have to create something else, and that's a
Right.
challenge, right? Like, that's a legitimate challenge, and so for me, it becomes about pulling in and calling upon that leader self, that sense of, like, I am
Mm,
the leader of my own reality. Whatever it
yep.
happens to be, I created it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and if I take ownership of all of it, then I can create something else.
Yeah.
So that's really an empowering stance. A lot of people don't hear the empowering stance in that, right? But it's a really empowering place to be because you take ownership of everything, right? Like the state
Yeah.
of your mind, the state of your body, the state of your reality, and how you show up with people. So this notion of I'd love your thoughts on this notion of authenticity because it's a one of my favorite words and it's quite frankly quite overused, but nonetheless one of my favorite, most powerful words.
So I think one of the things that we're grieving right now is the idea that we could two things that institutions would look after us.
Huh.
So, that was their role in the world and that's what they would do in exchange for our behaving appropriately, working hard, being loyal, showing up, playing by the rules. They would look after us. And that was, again, if we want to go back a couple of generations, that largely held true, right? They did what they were supposed to do. And I think one of the things that is a sense of loss that we need to really acknowledge is that
Mm.
because it leaves us feeling really adrift, like, oh my gosh. Um, and that so many of the things that we thought would buy us security, actually, we now know don't. It's an illusion, right? I thought that if I became the version of myself that, oh, the world would recognize, I would be secure. That is no longer necessarily true. You can be the best at your job and still get laid off tomorrow. I mean, our recent layoffs tell us that this is not about capability. This is about expediency.
Mm.
So I think the recalibrations that we are having to make within ourselves around themes of security, because of course, as humans, that's a primary concern is how do I keep safe? What do I do? And I think part of the old equation for safety and security was to be the most recognizable, the most, you know, um, as I talk about in the book, to do the off the shelf life choices, to do the thing that everybody else is doing, to do the thing that everybody else recognizes. And I think one of the weird things of this moment that AI is introducing into the equation is, oh, wait a second. If 1,000 other people can do the thing that I'm doing, it's replaceable.
Mhm.
So whew, that was never part of the script. The idea that uniqueness might actually be a path to security is a massive script flip. Wait, what? I'm trying to not make myself as, recognizable. My goal in life is no longer to become a corporate widget because what is happening to corporate widgets, human corporate widgets right now are getting replaced. So I'm suddenly in this moment of going, wait, am I going to believe that I can gain security by being unique, different, other, by having a niche, by having a specific interest? I had a really funny conversation with a colleague of mine who does similar work who told me about how when she was little, she was obsessed with frogs and like you know, all things pond, let's call it that.
Mm.
And she was like, her parents were like, well, nobody does that. That's weird. And of course, she got steered away from it because who made a career out of any niche interest like that? So she and I came up with this category of what we called frog jobs of like, maybe niche and quirky isn't such a bad thing anymore. Maybe if you're absolutely freaking passionate about frogs, you should go out and become, a frog expert because they're not going to be replaced all that quickly. They might have, and I'm not making the case for that, but the point being that, you're we have to allow ourselves to entertain a very different way of understanding how we garner security for ourselves because scaling corporate hierarchies, which has been the go to for several generations, is no longer our safest bet.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
we are grieving that because it's deeply imprinted in us that that's what you do. You find the most secure job with the biggest, fattest corporate that you can, and you install yourself in there, and that away you go. And it's like, no, no. You can, sure, do it, but don't assume that now you're set. And
Mhm.
so that opens up a range of possibilities and strategies that were once, completely off limits. But the question is, are you going to allow yourself to entertain those? Or are you going to keep going to the default because, woof.
Mhm.
So, I see that conversation getting more and more to the surface of everything that was rewarded in school really now is becoming irrelevant in life. Put your head down, don't speak up, don't have opinions, parrot the guy, the behaviors that worked when the job of education was to channel people into corporate jobs is becoming, it's training people for a world that is rapidly disappearing right in
Mhm.
front of us.
Mhm.
So the question is, for us who are already well into our lives, how are we going to negotiate with ourselves to do the leaps and the pivots that you described? And by the way, I know at least 10 people, for instance, who work in the advertising world who are facing this exact question right now. As that world changes beyond recognition around them, they're
Mhm.
sitting there going, I can't just assume that I'm going to carry on this way. And I can't even assume that the whole way that I've understood myself for my whole life is still going to be relevant in 5 years' time.
Mhm.
So there's some pretty big leaps that are required in me to reimagine what I can do, who I can be. Um, it ain't easy when you're 45 and have 3 kids, or when you're 55 but don't have enough money saved for retirement. But that is the current reality.
Mhm.
So this is not just some aspirational, like, oh, I want to be my best self. This is like the world that I was brought up to believe would operate in a certain way is disappearing. And
Mhm.
if I don't intentionally engage with whatever default script is telling me who I'm allowed to become and the choices that I'm allowed to make, I am going to struggle to adapt my operating system to fit this new world.
Mm.
Um, and that's for me where this theme of self permission, self direction, the ability to move in a way that has never been sanctioned before really comes into play.
Mm. Mhm. And one more that came up for me was self-initiation. Yeah.
Yes.
I have to
Yeah.
initiate myself and into my emergence and become more than the scripts, become more than the stories. And it's absolutely necessary, as you're saying, otherwise we're what's the otherwise for you? What's the
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the little phrases that I used with a client the other day was, "You're going to wait for a pink slip," which is what a lot of people are doing right now. They're waiting for the external force to tell them it's done, game over, time to reboot as a new character. Or you're going to write yourself a permission slip to figure out what you're going to be moving forward. Do you wait for the external threat to force this reimagining? Or you're going to sit there right now and take as you say, a very clear eyed look at the world around you, which probably scares the shit out of you because we're all looking around the world feeling scared to death.
Yeah.
But this is real. And so, you can't cling to the life raft of who you've always been. It's time to move into this with a degree of clarity and intentionality.
Mm.
And I actually believe we're all far more well equipped than we allow ourselves to ever engage with, that we have a lot at our disposal.
Mhm.
But, it does take some really intentional, as you say, self initiation, direction. We don't have to do it all alone. Okay. I think, one of my ambitions with the book and with everything around it is to create communities of practice because so many people are going through this,
Mhm.
whether they're 21 years old and looking at a job market that they feel has no clear entry points, or 45 years old going, oh my gosh, I'm afraid my industry is going to cease to exist before I ever get close to retirement. There are a lot of people who are sitting there going, the landscape is changing,
Mhm.
and I don't necessarily have a clear sense of how I'm going to move forward in it. And I don't think we all have to sit in our own houses and figure this all out on ourselves. But at the end of the day, like, okay, it's my life. Nobody's coming to save me. And nobody's coming to give me the permission that I need to give myself to take one small step towards, moving in the direction that I think might be um, more expansive, more full of possibility. Um, yeah, it's real, and
Mhm.
it's a reckoning. But I
Mhm.
think it can bring, one of the things I talk about in the book is maybe the unraveling is a renaissance of sorts.
Mhm.
for people to come into self and story in a way that never felt allowed before. So, it's not to try and be too pie in the sky about what I know is really hard for all of us. We're all grieving a version of the world that it just is slowly disappearing, but I think we need to hold that and at the same time start to say, "Maybe I actually have more at my disposal that I'm allowing myself to consider right now
Mhm,
to find my way forward."
mhm. Thank you for that, for speaking to our far greater capacity than we've been allowed to ever consider as possible.
Mm, yeah.
So what I'd love to do now is, see if anybody has any questions. If you do, just pop them in the chat, and we can explore those questions. And if you don't, that's okay. Thank you for being here and, listening live. This is awesome.
Yeah, I
Because
loved
this
it.
is like a leap of faith for both of us, right? Like, it's like you just jump in and you see where it takes you, and you don't really know where it's gonna take you. You just know it's gonna be meaningful in some way and expansive in some way.
Well, and I wanna go back to the conversation of I wanted to do it. Like, I don't wanna
Yeah.
be too simplistic here, but in my own life, the things that I've wanted to do. Now, they haven't all been brilliant. They haven't all been like, wow, big W's, like, whew, but I've not regretted them. I've rarely sort of gone, oh, that was terrible.
Mhm.
Even if they were mildly uncomfortable, disappointing, any number of things. It's like, okay, well, I wanted to do it. I got something out of it. I probably learned something out of it. So for me, if I have a very clear sense of, "Oh, yeah, I really wanna sit and have this conversation," I don't I'm not too worried about, um, knowing how it's gonna go because I'm listening to that sense of, "Yeah, I think I wanna try this, and
Mhm.
I know that I'm gonna learn something out of it." And for me, that's absolutely the case in this example. Like,
Yes.
I'm really good with whatever came out of this because it would be a learning for me, and that's all I need.
And what I love about this process too, it's like I made you ask a bunch of questions and I took a bunch of notes and all of it relevant to inform and not the script to follow. Where it's like we go where the conversation pulls us, we go where the moment pulls us, and that's how you engage your life really. And that's expansive in and of itself.
Well,
S-
and I think it comes back to that self-trust. Like, if you trust yourself, which I do, that I'm pretty confident that I can sit in conversation and roll with it and figure it out and find my way, then I don't need you to tell me what you're gonna ask me so that I feel secure. That security is in me. It's not
Mhm.
created by you. It's handing me a script. It's me knowing that, okay, even if I don't have an answer or I stumble, that's all right. Nothing terrible is going to come of this. And I think that trusting yourself, believing that you are your best security, whether it's in a conversation or, in other experiences in life, is like, oh, once you start to feel that, there's this like, "Oh, wow. That's pretty cool." I'm able to move through the world with so much less friction and fear. I don't, as you say, stay small because that's the only way that I know how to be safe. I kind of go through doors and go, "Okay." Not recklessly, but with enough circumspection to know that the downside is probably not gonna be massive and the upside can be really delightful.
Mm.
You can go, "Okay, I'll give it a try," and see how it goes.
So what I heard you say is that self-trust is cultivated.
Oh, it's all of it is earned. Every single thing that we talked about today is earned, and I think that's a really important point. My phone is dying, so I'm gonna shift a little bit just to plug it in. Um, I think part of the kind of self-help movement, if you will, over the last several decades has been so incredibly, cognitive, reflective.
Mm.
It's put such a strong emphasis on, the power of reflection and big believer in that, obviously. But especially when I talk to young people, but even when I talk to people who are facing career transition, I'm like, please, please, please don't sit in your house and meditate on this. Go out, talk to people, network with people, put yourself in new situations. The very worst thing you can do is sort of retract into self and head and bed and story, because nothing is earned in terms of self belief. And for me, a very early period in my life of vastly different experiences was like just depositing so much into myself of I'm okay. I'm okay. I can find my way through a lot of different things. Go out into the world. And it doesn't, again, have to be deep.
Mhm.
When you put yourself in new circumstances, you hack so much. You hack into, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be all right? I've never done this. What will they think of me? I feel like a fool. Literally walking into a restaurant by yourself that you've never been to, I would I would argue that that is a more useful experience than, sitting by yourself and journaling about what you wanna be when you grow up sort of thing. I'm
Mhm.
exaggerating.
Mhm.
Lived experience in new spaces is like, for me, the ultimate life hack.
Mhm.
Go out, earn capability in your body, expand your discomfort tolerance to be, okay, I can be uncomfortable and still move forward. That's essentially the message that you want to keep reinforcing to your brain is discomfort is not a reason to turn back. It's a reason to either stay put or, look around, figure out if there's danger, because obviously if there's danger, you don't want to be there. But for a lot of us, it's not danger at all. It's just, I feel uncomfortable. I think we all need to intentionally build our discomfort tolerance. I
Mhm.
hate to say it, but it's
That's a good
uncomfortable.
one. Mhm.
It's really uncomfortable right now, and as you say, it can leave us feeling totally paralyzed, but actually one small step, one tiny step carrying that discomfort into the world to be with another person in a new place goes so far in terms of helping you realize that despite that feeling, you can still move.
Mhm.
You don't have to freeze.
Mhm. That's a powerful one because so many of us freeze in place and time, right? Like we're frozen possibly when we're 4 years old, and then we carry that throughout our lives, and so leaving our home becomes so challenging. And then we reach for big dreams, but there's a disconnect between the dream and the lived reality and the safety of leaving your home, right? Or if that becomes a metaphor, the safety of leaving what was behind, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So I
Totally.
I definitely hear if you want to evolve beyond what has been, you have to be willing to take chances elsewhere, right? And that could be as simple as going to the restaurant by yourself and
Yeah.
enjoying every moment of it.
Yeah, even the moments that feel a little bit like, "Oh," Yeah, I mean, again, just it's we cannot underestimate that when we are not experiencing any pleasure in our lives, it is so much harder
Mhm.
to move into new spaces in other more consequential ways in our lives. We are literally sapped of
Mhm.
everything we need to kind of feed us to start to engage with the stuff that's harder, with the stuff that might not feel good, with the stuff that's more complex. And I mean that's everything right now. And I know so many people who think it's, it feels very silly right now to focus on self or to do things that feel good. I found myself trying to cook meals that I really love right now
Mm.
because it's a really simple way of ticking a number of important boxes. I'm learning new things. I'm looking for new recipes. They don't have to be wildly, whatever, but just I haven't done it before. I'm curious. I'm in a learning mode. I'm exercising agency over meeting needs of mine and of my family. So the locus of control is tight within me. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I do it. It's done. I have something to show for it. Um, and it feels good. And actually, "Oh, that's nice. Oh, yum." I mean, maybe again, it's not great, but chances are I'm gonna be like, "Oh, that was cool. Okay." Little things like that for me are a wonderful like anchor
Mm,
into I'm not in this the biggest thing we have to guard against right now is swirling within ourselves in this kind of ruminative state of fear and imagination. And the
mm,
only way to do that is to really put ourselves in the world, in life, with people, strangers or not, and I really want to kind of emphasize that that's your being present. The
mm,
easiest way to be present is when you're doing something that you really want to do
mm, mhm,
or
and
something
grounding
that's
yourself.
new.
Yeah,
Yeah, you ground yourself in
yeah,
something. Like, actually do that. Like, do that as a practice,
mhm,
not because it's just some sort of distraction, but because it's the work, it's the stuff of being alive. And we have like we dismiss it, and yet it's everything that life is made of.
mm. I, I'm really grateful for my journey, and it has not been easy. So people look at me now and they have perceptions about, "Oh, well, it's different."
Mm,
It's not different, right? We're all wired in a particular way, and our depth of desire for it to be different makes the difference.
mm,
So, I really appreciate your framing around do the thing, right? Like, just do it, to quote Nike here. And just engage with what's there for you to engage and notice what happens. Don't worry about you burnt at one time, right? Don't worry about, your son might doesn't like potatoes or whatever. Like, don't worry about those things. Just engage it and then see where it takes you because it's gonna take you further than you have been, right? So if you create the same meat and potatoes kind of meal every time, and this is a metaphor, right? Like, if you do that, well, you're always gonna eat meat and potatoes, and you might be bored, but you're still gonna know that it's gonna be meat and potatoes. So it's like,
right.
let's introduce something new here. Let's bring in some flavor. Let's bring in something from other than the status quo, other than the default, and see where it takes us. So,
Yeah, and that's the subtle little exchange that you're gonna make with yourself,
mm,
which is that, okay, I'm exchanging predictability for diversity, I
mm,
don't know that this is gonna work, that people are gonna like it, but I'm accepting that the process of creating it will give me things that the process of, in my default mode, making the same thing I've made 1,000 times before will not.
mhm, mhm,
And that there is pleasure and value in that process, regardless of the fact that you don't know what the outcome is. Because guess what? We're living in a world of unknown and unseen outcomes. And if we require a predictable outcome in order to act, we will remain stuck in place.
mm,
So we have to start gaining comfort with acting without the guarantee of a predictable outcome.
mm,
And yes, I believe that small things like choosing new recipes is a great way to just start to oil the ability to deal with it. I'm not saying it's going to allow you to go out and deal with global instability, but it'll bring you into self. It'll teach you some things, it'll feed you, it'll do a lot of beneficial things for you. So your choices aren't lying in bed or running outside and changing the world.
mm,
The best thing you can do for the world is make yourself feel as alive as possible, and then
mm,
you will carry forward and move forward from a wonderful place where you will probably make your best contribution. Like, focus on that. Just
mm.
allow yourself to focus on that, and then let's see where you go from there.
Wow, I was gonna ask you about what's your message, and I feel like you just boom.
Boom! There we go. There's the message. My headphones have died right in time. They're like, "No, you're done. You've shared your message. We're gonna go to sleep now." Yeah, that's the message. The
Yeah.
best thing the world needs, the most vital, alive, expansive version of you. It's not indulgent. You're not rogue. You're actually preparing yourself to step into the world in a way that is both the most satisfying and has the greatest chance of you making your best contribution.
Mm. Mhm.
So, yeah.
And as, one of my clients loves this word. That's sarcastic, but it's like, this is your birthright, right?
Yeah.
Aliveness, is your birthright. So it's like you actually engaging that is you reclaiming that which is innately, undeniably yours to reclaim. So that's such a mic dropped, moment. Okay.
Oh, there's a message there. Can you show your book again? Sorry, I missed the beginning. Yes, Frederic. It's called The 10 Permissions, available on Amazon, available through Barnes and Noble. My website is 10permissions.com. You can see it there. Yeah, and we came out last October, so I'm still very much in the early stages of sort of socializing the book and getting the word out there. But I think it's a great time for us to be having this conversation. I
Mhm.
think it's ever more necessary, and I'm really grateful that you gave me some space to talk to you about it.
Thank you for your willingness to be here and have the chat, because you and I met through that post on unsubscribing from gurus, right? And it's like the voices of women matter more than ever. If we don't embrace the voices of ourselves and each other, then we're in deep, deep trouble. So for me, this is a massive invitation into moving forward. So all right, thank you. So we've got the 10 permissions. We talked about that. Now I would love to know a little bit more about um, what are your offerings? Like I don't quite know what you quote unquote do.
What do you mean?
You know?
What do you mean? I don't know what I do either. It's emerging. It's emerging,
Mhm,
Stella.
mhm,
No, having published a book last October, I'm sort of shifting this year into, as I said, what I'm calling the practice of permission. So I have two offers that are, if you go to the website, you'll see versions of this, but they're kind of gaining a little more clarity, even in me, radical
process.
honesty here.
Yeah.
It is still a work in progress. So basically, it's creating spaces where people can explore what kind of pausing the default and, redirecting and rewriting stories and scripts for yourself would look like, whether that's for teams.
Mhm,
Um, so I have an offer, which I'm going to be talking more about in the coming months with a colleague of mine. We're talking about creating permissions labs for teams where we look at sort of the internal and the external signals that are shaping our understanding of who we're allowed to be, how we're allowed to behave. As we've already pointed to, there are intergenerational issues. There are teams that are working under such pressure to innovate, meet constant demands for disruption and sort of profit making that a lot of the explicit understanding of how are we allowed to do this? Am I allowed to question? Am I allowed to pause? Am I allowed to challenge convention?
mhm,
These things that once perhaps were quite clear are not clear anymore. And for me, at a time of rapid change, this sort of explicit um, permission setting is critical for teams to operate in a way that is both most satisfying for them as individuals and most aligned with why they're there as a group.
mhm,
Otherwise, you get conflict, you get hesitation, you get, worry, you get all sorts of things. So the idea is to work with groups to kind of be far more explicit about creating the conditions for them to feel allowed to bring their best contributions. Similarly, I'm going to take some of that same stuff into creating permissions labs for people in transition. So, careers in transition. So, how do I allow myself to start to explore what's possible without feeling like I instantly have to have a plan and goals and clarity, and it all has to look like something that I can give an elevator pitch to everybody I know around me. I think people are craving a space to kind of allow something in them to emerge
Mhm.
without it having to be the most acceptable and clear version in its first take and in its first cut, because for most people it's not.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm actually looking to run a pilot on that over the first and second quarter of this year. So if anybody who's here wants to join me, then they can DM me on Substack to find out more. But it's sort of, I've had so many people who've read the book and kind of gone, oh, I need to allow myself to think very differently
Mhm.
about what my future looks like, but I don't know where to begin.
Mhm.
Um, this is for them.
Mhm.
And so far, I've had interest again. And part of the point is not to put a bunch of people in there who all are the same, literally like 23-year-olds and 53-year-olds. But the message is the same.
Mhm. Mhm.
I can't rely on an old operating way of operating to find my way forward. And frankly, I don't want to
Mhm.
either. I want to do this differently,
Mhm.
but I'm not quite sure what that looks like. So, yeah, there's sort of, so we're moving into the practice of permission, and we're looking at working with corporate teams, and we're looking at working with individuals who are in transition in a world that's in transition, and how to support them, because this is not easy.
Mhm.
And, I think, but I also don't think it's quite as hard as we might imagine it to be before we just sit down and give ourselves room
Mhm.
to have these conversations from a calm and kind of clear-eyed place, and not a panicked sense of, "I have to know," or "I have to reinvent myself," or "I need to have a plan." It's like, "Okay, just it's okay. Let's
Like, exhale. That's okay.
exhale, come into self. You've probably got so much at your disposal. There's so much you have. Let's um let's figure out how to move forward in a way that feels like a deliberate, you know, steps rather than a dancing around or a sprinting around trying to figure out what you think good looks like in a world where it's very unclear."
Mhm. Thank you so much, Jill. I really appreciated this. I wanted to leave with this quote I kinda made up as you were talking around daring to imagine in a shifting and changing landscape and building your discomfort tolerance. So there's those 3 things really, pull the conversation together for me, and there's something about aliveness, I might add that in there too, but there's some it's like those are the things that pulled this conversation together for me, and then we can have explorations along the lines of all of these, but I am very clear that permission begins with our daring to imagine, right? Like giving ourselves permission to dare, and it's a process. So I love
Yeah.
that daring, right? It's not just dare, it's a process of an ongoing thing that you do.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Absolutely. And I think aliveness for me sits at the center of it. You cannot dare. The daring comes from a place of aliveness. Now, yes, sometimes that aliveness is a, it's a heightened sense of,
Mm,
yeah,
mhm,
perhaps fear. Perhaps I have to. I'm going to do it. I'm going to jump. But, that's not desirable for most of us.
mm,
And actually, most of us, when we're in that space, are not interested in daring. We're interested in just protecting ourselves. Yeah. So we have to move ourselves a little bit out of that self protection space in order to even entertain the concept of daring. And I don't think that you can do that unless you are tending to yourself on a more routine basis. So the dares can start really small. Daring can simply look like things that I haven't done before, things that you know, not sure how it's going to be like. That's daring.
mm,
Anything that you finish it and you go, "Oh, I did it. Hey, did it. Cool."
mhm,
Stack those things up and then start to kind of look at capital D daring.
Mm.
right? But
Mm,
yes, yes, that's the practice, and that's the work, and that's the adventure, and that's, that's the stuff of life.
and it's ongoing.
Oh, yeah, and
It's
it should be. Of course it is. Like, I don't want it not to be. I don't wanna I'm not interested in curling up in a ball and not daring. Like, I'm gonna dare for as long as I'm taking breaths,
Mhm, mhm.
because otherwise, what is this? What is this?
Yeah, what's the
Why
point?
am I here?
Yeah,
What is the point?
that's a
I
very good
really
question. Why am I here? That's a very good one for us to ponder.
mm,
Why am I here? What is my intention for being here? Thank
mm.
you so much.
Thank you.
I look forward to re-listening to this and seeing
Mm,
what nuggets I pick up a second time around.
great.
I will connect with you, and if anybody has anything that you wanna share, Jill welcomes DMs, I welcome DMs, whatever it is that you're curious about or, considering, etcetera. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Jill, for this
Thank you.
wonderful exploration, and, I hope you have a spectacular night.
Thank you. I will, and I hope you have a spectacular day. And
Thank
thank you again, and thanks to everybody who joined us for this. I appreciate your attention in a world where, gosh, it's pulled in a lot of different directions. You stayed with us. Thank you, Frederique, for being here and for, just sticking with us. So it was
Mhm.
really great.
Mhm. Have a beautiful day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.